Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Mind Muscle Connection podcast. Today is a solo episode, and I have a topic I want to dive into, and that is a client case study around if you're struggling to build muscle, but you're also afraid of gaining weight. I want to go over my client Greg. He was stuck in the same spot. So again, if you're someone who, it's like, hey, I know I need to build more muscle, but I also don't want to gain body fats and get put on too much body fat, then this is for you. So I think even if you're a woman, male, either one, you can take something from this. And again, I think most people get themselves into this trap of trying to stay too lean and they're not able to build as much muscle for that. And therefore they sell themselves short on really changing their body composition. When we talk about body recomp and changing our body, we're looking at dropping some body fat, but also adding some muscle. I think too many people just overly focus on just the losing body fat side and underestimate how, yes, you can build a good amount of muscle right off the bat, but how tough it can be to continue to sustain that over time and really get that look that you want to get. So again, if you're trying to add muscle, but you're afraid to gain fat and, ruin the progress that you've made, then you definitely want to listen to this case study on Greg. So Greg came to me, he was frustrated. He was training super hard. He was tracking his macros, but he just wasn't building the amount of muscle that he wanted to. So Greg's in his early 40s. He's a dad, a couple kids, works in finance, has a lot of responsibilities. So first kind of clue there is decent amount of stress overall just from that. No matter what, even if you have everything dialed in, a couple kids, a full-time job, social obligations, work, like those are all stressors on the body. And I think people tend to underestimate the impact that those can have on our ability to change our body. The big thing being all that is they're all stressors on the body. We can only recover from so much. And so we need to be smart with what we do here. So again, he came to me, he was frustrated. He was about 155 pounds when he came to me. And when we looked at all clients that come to me, we do a 3-day food log initially, right? Just kind of want to see what their eating habits are, eating patterns, and wanted to just kind of see where his calories were at. He was tracking his calories. Again, he was at 155 and he was around 1,900 to 2,100 a day. And the big thing for him is he was afraid to lose leanness. So he was eating relatively low calories for a male and somebody who is 155 pounds. Again, those are numbers that I would think would be closer to fat loss dieting for somebody of his size, but he's already lean. Like he had abs and he was a lean guy. But again, so there's some clues here that I want to leave there. But again, his body wasn't getting what it needed to grow. So essentially his calories were just relatively low. And again, he wasn't getting what he needed. So like when he came to me, one of the things he was talking about was he felt like his training was the biggest question to him. Was he doing the right program, the right lifts, volume, frequency, et cetera? And again, these are all valid questions, but this is what I commonly see with this type of avatar is, hey, is it and sorry, Greg he has 3 kids, not 2. So even worse. And he has a dog too. And those can be stressful. Anyways, again, he's thinking, hey, is it my training that is the big problem? And again, there's probably some things that we could incorporate there. But again, the big issue being it wasn't necessarily his training. And again, this is where a lot of people get themselves caught up is that they want to maintain leanness and then they really think it's their training that is the big thing. And again, like I said, that's part of it. But the real big issue was his caloric intake there. And again, I see a lot of people get themselves into this situation, right? So there are situations where you don't need to intentionally gain weight to build more muscle. Again, you're not training properly, you're at too high body fat levels. These are some signs. Other lifestyle habits are out of whack. Again, in those situations, you're at higher body fat levels. We wouldn't want to be like, hey, in order to build more muscle, you need to just gain a bunch of weight, right? That's where I see this kind of misapplied as, oh, just as I need to eat more to build muscle. And then you see people where it's not the right situation for them, right? They're just at higher body fat levels and they would be better off doing a combination of losing some body fat and building more muscle. But again, so you have people that they take that too far and then they want to gain weight when they don't need to. They already have enough. But then you have people in this scenario was Greg where, in that scenario, like you do still want to have periods of time where you're in a fat loss phase and you're getting close to maintenance, but you just wouldn't want to purposely gain a ton of weight. And again, I don't mean, oh, hey, you get to say 175 and then you keep your weight exactly at 175. Again, maybe your range is, hey, let's keep your weight somewhere between 175 and 183 or something. I'm just throwing out numbers. But for you, it wouldn't be like, hey, every time, hey, I want you to get up to 190 or 195. Like for that person, we wouldn't actively push weight gain. But again, at some point, you will need to get to your maintenance calories, right? You will need to get there. You can't always fat loss diet. We need to take a break, right? But keep this in mind, the leaner you are, the more you need to at least put on some weight, but we want to do it in a strategic way. Okay. So somebody in Greg's situation, they have abs. He's 155. He wants to build more muscle. He's going to need to gain weight to build muscle. He can't maintain and keep his weight at 155 and recomp. But you take someone who's 175 and has more body fat, 15 to 20% for men or higher, 28 to 32% or higher for women, they're better off staying around maintenance or small surplus to continue to build muscle. Okay. But the big thing here is now So those are the two scenarios. Greg's in the scenario where he needs increase his caloric intake and he needed to gain some weight to build muscle. It wasn't his training. Again, could his training be improved? Probably, but his big issue, the big thing that was holding him back was he's trying to eat 19 to 2100 calories because he was afraid of losing leanness. In turn, that was hurting his long-term ability to add muscle and really make a massive difference in his body composition. So the big thing here though is in the past, the kind of thought was, oh, hey, you just need to gain weight. You just need to push weight up as much as possible. And that's a mistake. So we need to do it in a strategic way. And so again, when people hear they need to gain weight to build muscle, they go about it all wrong, right? One, gain weight too quickly. Essentially, it's just eating too many calories. So this could be, oh, hey, I'm just trying to gain weight. So I'm just going to eat pizza and burgers and just food like that all the time. Again, it can be what people call dirty bulk, whatever it is, or you could just be eating too many calories in general of even clean foods. But either way, if you're gaining weight too quickly, you're eating too many calories. Your energy balance is out of whack, right? So that's the first mistake people make in this situation is they try to gain too quickly. Then we have poor diet quality. So again, just go back to what I said there. It's, oh, hey, I'm not in a fat loss phase. So now I don't need to eat veggies. I don't need to eat lean meats. I can just eat anything and everything. And so diet quality goes to crap. And then that leads to the first issue of now you're eating too many calories. And again, if we're giving some people are going to be more prone to this than others, but if we're not giving our body the food it needs, the micronutrients it needs, and we're eating like a lot of processed foods, that can lead to higher levels of inflammation, and that could oxidative stress, and that could lead to suboptimal muscle gain. You're not putting your body in the best position to build muscle. So we still want to pay attention to quality in this diet quality in this situation. Not pushing training. So that definitely is one thing. Greg was worried about his training, but again, not pushing training is certainly an issue for sure in this situation. If you're trying to gain this weight, I see this all the time, hey, you need to be in a surplus to build muscle, then people overly focus on that, don't focus on the training side of things, and they don't really push their training, right? Maybe they're super inconsistent with training, or they just go in and do random things. So they're not pushing their training. Again, that's a mistake you make when you're trying to gain weight. So the worst thing you could do would be to really push your weight up, like super quick for the reasons I just said, and then also not really pushing your training consistently. That would be the worst of both worlds. Another scenario is maybe somebody's in a small surplus, they're managing their nutrition well, but they're not pushing their training. That's going to be a problem in and of itself. You're also going to not gain as much muscle. So again, both of these things play a role. Gaining weight for too long. Again, it just gets to that point to where you just all of a sudden are like, I don't really want a fat loss diet, but I want to get to X amount of weight. So I'm just going to keep pushing my weight till I get there. So it's the same thing as somebody trying to diet down. For some people, it could, depending on how much you need to lose, we probably need to break it up into multiple fat loss phases. This could, again, be something where to get to 200 pounds, let's say you're 160, that may not be doable. You could get to 200, but is it going to be the right weight? And again, people think, hey, I want to be 200 pounds. This person is 200 pounds. I want to look like them. So I'm going to get to 200 pounds. And again, if you're natural, it's just going to be hard to be lean and be 200 pounds if you're under 6'2". Again, I just threw numbers out there, so I'm sure somebody could hear that and be like, that doesn't sound about right. But you get my point. It's hard to get lean and be 200 pounds with muscle if you're natural. You can get there, but it's challenging. So again, just gaining weight for too long, or that's one scenario. Someone wants to get to a goal weight, they keep pushing it, or you just are like, you just get sloppy with your nutrition and you don't want to get into a fat loss phase. And so again, you just get sloppy with it. You have poor diet quality. You're just sloppy with your nutrition. And so then you gain for too long. Okay. So that's another mistake people make in this process and why they end up gaining more body fat when we're trying to gain weight here. Low calories, so really high days followed by like low days. So again, you'll see this a lot where again, a couple different scenarios here. One person is like, hey, I know I need to eat more. So they eat a ton in one day and they're not monitoring any of this. And then the next 2 or 3 days, they don't eat as much. So again, they're having this day where they're eating a lot and then they're not eating a lot. So then they're not really, it's going to be hard for them to gain weight and put themselves in a good position to build muscle if they were in Greg's situation, right? Again, somebody has really high days and they're like, oh crap, I need to lower my next day now. And then they go really low. Again, that's not going to be great from a body composition standpoint. You may gain weight over time, or it may be in the right range, but either way, it's probably not going to be the greatest from a body composition standpoint. And then lastly, we just have poor lifestyle habits. So again, in this process, this is where I say getting a little bit sloppy with things, excessive alcohol intake, poor sleep, poor stress management. Again, if we're gaining weight in that process and this is happening, you're probably going to be gaining a little bit more body fat than you would want in that process. So then what happens here in this situation? Then you end up going right back to a deficit, or you never increase calories and end up staying stuck in the state where your body doesn't want to add any more muscle despite training hard and eating well for these reasons, right? So again, now, anytime I try and gain weight, I just gain a ton of body fat. It's probably the things that you're doing that are the big thing. And then this leads to people not wanting to do that anymore. And then they don't ever really change their body and they get stuck in this place where Greg was stuck in of eating 1900 to 2100 calories. For women, you could look at 1,300 to 1,500, whatever it is. It's all relative there. So I wanted to hit on that first because that's going to give you an idea of, hopefully now you have an understanding like, you know what, I do actually find myself doing that when I'm trying to build muscle, right? I'm outside of a fat loss diet. And so now I want to go over what we did for Greg. Like I talked about with Greg, again, if you want to see his picture, I'll link this post that I made in the show notes so you can see what Greg looks like. Again, he looks a lot bigger. He's not as shredded in his midsection, but you can still see a hint of abs. And you can still see lines like in his obliques. So but he's visibly bigger in the picture. And again, I'm going to tie all this in, but again, that's what we're going for here with that. So again, with Greg, I realized, okay, so he's eating 1,900 to 2,100 calories. He's very active. I think he had some days where, and he was doing this too, right? He'd have some days where on average he was eating about 1,900 to 2,100 calories, but he would have some days where he was at 1,800, and then he had some days where he was at 2,700, then 20. So he was all over the place. And then he was also averaging about 15,000 steps a day. Okay. And he was about 155. And that first week we worked together, he actually dropped, like his average weight went down, which again, I'm not surprised by. So again, that's where he started at. And so with this calorie amount, I'm like, if you want to get bigger, like you're shooting yourself in the foot here. And again, maybe for him, he felt like in the past, he would start to add calories and he would gain weight. I think part of the problem here is Greg's metabolism was likely downregulated a bit. It was adapted to what he was doing. Okay. And so for him, was total daily energy expenditure dropped down. And what that's going to do is it's going to mess with your testosterone. Okay. So this is for men. It's going to mess with your testosterone. It's going to slow down your thyroid. And again, when you're lower, it's going to impact your total daily energy expenditure. It's going to impact how you feel. Your libido could go down and you're just not going to be in a good spot to build more muscle. Your body's going to be like, whoa, we don't want to do this. We have to take care of everything else in your body. And again, adding muscle at this point is low on our priority list. So again, Greg was already lean. He was scared to gain more weight, but he also was shooting himself in the foot because of his inputs, because he wasn't eating enough calories. He was moving a ton on top of it. That's the other key thing is for some people, they may have to eat lower calorie if they don't move a ton, but he was also weight training 4 or 5 days a week. He was doing some cardio. He was getting a ton of steps. And then on top of it, I mentioned he had high stress. His sleep wasn't great. And so all these things just led to him like doing a lot, but his body just was not in a great spot to add muscle. So for him, if he were to just now all of a sudden be like, I just need to gain weight, he may have put on a little bit more body fat until he worked on some of these other things in combination. And again, also understood that his metabolism was slightly downregulated during this. His body just had adapted to it. But again, the cool thing with this is a lot of people think when their metabolism adapts that they will never be able to bring it back up. It's stuck, and it's not. It will adapt upwards as well too. Again, I see a lot of people get themselves here where they get lean, and then they want to maintain that leanness. And then now they match their caloric intake with that. And then they never bring their calories up because they're afraid of gaining body fat. And so their metabolism will adapt to it. And now they're just in the suboptimal kind of state, right? Their body's just not thriving as much as it could be if they worked on all these other things, which I'm going to talk about, and being okay with gaining a little bit of weight, but in a strategic way as well too. All right. So that's where Greg was at, right? That was his big thing. That's why he was stuck. That's why he was not building muscle, why he was training hard and not adding any muscle, was for all those reasons I just mentioned. So now I want to talk about what we did specifically. So with all my clients, first thing we're going to do, obviously, like I said, I'm looking at this food log. I'm also looking at their lifestyle, right? I have clients fill out what their lifestyle is. I ask them questions about it, et cetera, and we figure out. And so for him, it was, again, we needed to work on his sleep hygiene, circadian rhythm, like getting that in check, making sure that was in line with what his goals were. And also stress management. Again, he was doing a lot. And so we needed to work on just lowering stress on the body overall. Again, whether that be through stress management, but also taking just stress off of all the inputs he was giving to his body. And another way to lower stress is, hey, let's kind of get those calories up a little bit, right? And again, in a strategic way. Those were kind of the big things. And then obviously just doing a lot of training. Again, that was another thing that I saw. So what we did for him is we increased his calories gradually. So it wasn't like, oh, hey, you need to be at 2,800 calories. It was, hey, let's kind of work your way up. Anybody that, and for most people, Greg was lean, but he wasn't to the point where it was like, he just came off a bodybuilding show and it's like, dude, you got to get your calories up. He was probably close to 10% body fat. So it's not like he was sub 10%, where this is going to be more of an issue. So we could slowly bring his calories up. And again, when I say slowly, I'm not saying we added 10 calories per week. It was a couple hundred. And from there, I just track body weight and see where that trends. Over time, we increased his calories gradually. We worked up to 3,000 a day. So this obviously improved his energy and recovery. But that wasn't the only piece, right? Again, we have to look at also like the training input of it as well too, which I'll talk about. And then I talked about addressing his lifestyle, which is also very important. You can't just increase your calories and then expect everything to be perfect. Again, it will help a little bit, but there's still other things that we need to focus on in that process. But again, we worked up to 3,000 calories gradually, right? Slowly worked our way up there. And so we had controlled fat gain in that process. Again, doing all those things that I talked about, but the opposite, right? So again, having good diet quality, making sure he's getting enough protein, making sure training's in check. And I'll talk about training here too in a minute. Sleep, lifestyle, going slow with the weight gain. We did all those things to control fat gain. And so what we did is once he hit 165 and he felt good, and you can see in his pictures that he definitely gained muscle and he just looked fuller overall. We were able to adjust to 26 to 2,800 calories for a quote unquote recomp effect. So this is something that I utilize now with clients is, okay, so we're going to work our way up. Okay. And once you get to a certain weight range where again, maybe your body composition isn't your super most shredded look, but you still look good. You feel good. Once we get there, it's okay. Hey, now we're going to decrease our calories a little bit closer to maintenance, right? And we can get somewhat of a recomp effect where it's like, hey, you're still like your body fat, weight's in a good spot to where your body feels good. We're firing on all cylinders in terms of lifestyle, everything like that. Now we can bring your calories closer to maintenance and push training, and you'll add muscle, but your body's in a good spot to where you're going to feel good and you're going to be in a better position to build muscle. So I think, again, like I said, one mistake people make is they just continually gain weight during their phases. Like, oh, hey, I'm in a muscle gaining phase. I'm just going to keep gaining weight because I know a surplus is good. When I think a better approach is you gain some weight, nice and controlled. And then once you find a good range that you're in, then you slow down. You really slow down or get to maintenance because you're in a good spot now and your body feels good. Again, we want to pay attention to your biofeedback. So we were checking with Greg and his check-ins and make sure training's in a good spot. That's super important, right? And so we want to make sure all those things are in check. And if you're checking the boxes on all those things, biofeedback's good, body composition is in a good spot. Again, not your greatest, but you feel good. You feel great from day to day. Let's just sit here now for a while. Again, that allows you to continue to build more muscle, but also limit body fat gain in that process. Again, in the past, I would have just been like, dude, you got to keep adding weight, right? You got to stay in a surplus. And then again, people gain a little bit more body fat than they want. And then it's like the initial part of the fat loss phase is just getting off that body fat. And then people just end up spinning their wheels, right? Where with this approach, it's okay, now we can hit the ground running in your next fat loss phase, or you just feel good here. So we just stay here for a while until, again, you don't feel good. And then maybe we make an adjustment up, right? So again, it all just depends on where someone wants to go. But that's what we did with Greg. And so we had that kind of recomp effect there. So that's my approach now with building phases is, again, this is all different for everyone, right? In terms of how much we have to gain. It's, hey, let's see where you're at. Let's see how you're feeling. Look at your body composition. And then once we get there, we can hang around here now and make sure training's in a good spot. And then you could sit here forever if you wanted to, or again, once you're ready to go back into fat loss phase, then we can do that. Or if you, again, start to not feel great, then we can increase calories a little bit more on there. We would just look at the trade-offs of, okay, maybe from a body fat perspective, what that would look like. So that's how I do it now. And again, if we feel good, we're good to go. That's how I do my building phases. And that's how, because again, in the past, right now I'm sitting around where Greg was at 165-ish. Again, not my leanest, but I feel good. Training's still good. And I just feel like if I push to 170, I'm just going to start to accumulate more body fat, and it's just not going to look good. And it's just going to not be as productive. Again, I've done that in the past. I pushed my weight up to 180, 190. And again, maybe I built a little bit more muscle, but I also put a lot of body fat on, and there was a lot of work to get down to. Now, I'm not there at that point anymore to where I want to do that. That's kind of my approach now and what I did with Greg with that. And then finally, the other thing I want to kind of go over with what we did is we optimize his training. This is a big piece of the equation. And like I said, that's a mistake people make in a building phase is their training is not optimized. They're just going in, doing a random program, do it for a couple of weeks. Maybe they're just going in and not really pushing training. Maybe their exercise selection isn't great, right? So, oh, hey, this exercise someone said I need to do, or I found this on Instagram, or this works for so, and maybe it's not a good exercise for you. And then again, in Greg's situation, we also need to make sure you're recovering. So it's like we want to push intensity, but we also need to be strategic with when we push intensity and how often we push intensity. Again, too often either people don't push themselves enough and it's just a ton of junk volume that they're doing from a cardio standpoint, from a weight standpoint. It's just a bunch of junk. They just think the more they do, the better. Or you just have people that just really push intensity all the time too. Either or. And both of those are issues that we need to address at some point, right? So for Greg, we focused on progressive overload and muscle specific training and made sure that, again, we dial in all the other aspects and made sure that he was in a good spot to add muscle, right? So not only did we put his body in a good spot through stress management, getting better sleep, lifestyle optimization, and through the calorie standpoint and just body fat, right? Now he's in that perfect spot to really be able to add muscle. And that's no matter what you're doing, you want to make sure training's in a good spot, right? Again, like I said earlier, that's a big mistake people make when they're trying to gain weight is their training's just not optimized. And again, you could be missing the forest through the trees there if that is, I think that's I don't know what the saying is, but again, you could be missing it. And so we want to make sure training's in a good spot. And we want to make sure it's always there because that is super important. And again, maybe for you, there's periods of time where you're doing less, but it's still super intentional and focused. And again, there's just some progressive to it. There's a plan. It's not just random. That's really what we're looking at here with training. training when it comes to building muscles. We want those things. And then again, over time, you can continue to dial in your exercise selection. I don't think you need to have it perfect, but I think if you have the core principles of, hey, there's some strategy about what you're doing. And again, your exercise selection isn't so bad that you're like missing certain muscle groups or really overtraining a certain one. Again, but with that will get better over time. I think the big things are making sure there's progressive overload, you're pushing yourself enough, and there's some structure to your training. I think those are the three biggest things that really you need. And then everything else you can dial in over time. And for him, this was 4 days a week. My favorite split for 4 days a week for a client is going to be like an upper lower split. And so one day will be like more push focus, one day will be more quad focus, one day will be more hamstring focus, and then one day will be more chest back focus. Sorry. And then on those upper days, whatever the focus is, then so if push is the first focus, then you do a little bit of back too, right? And then you'll do some like tricep and bicep. And then maybe on the lower days, there'll be some like delt type work in there, something along those lines, like lateral raises and things like that. So that's typical programming. And then for Greg, we're doing a couple of days of cardio as well too, because he's in it when he started with me, he was in his late 30s. Now he's in his early 40s. That's super important to keep in some cardio. But again, we weren't just doing cardio to burn a ton of calories. There was a specific purpose with it. We're trying to improve his cardiovascular fitness and also again just managing intensity, because in this avatar, which is most people that listen, like we want to push it, but when people see things from a bodybuilder standpoint, somebody sees like Chris Bumstead or something. One, obviously he takes special sports supplements to help with his physique, which really makes a huge difference. I don't know personally, but just knowing what I know makes a big difference. And that's their life. And that's huge. That just, again, is just so underrated, especially when it comes to building muscle, because with building muscle, you have to be in the right position to like, your body has to be in the right environment to build muscle. You can't, again, and so that's why I'm a huge fan of like making sure that things outside of the gym are important or are in check, because it really does increase your ability to add more muscle in that process. So you're just in the right environment. But again, most people that are listening to this, you probably are similar to Greg, where you have all these things going on. So like for him, again, you have to be a little bit smarter with what you do. You can't just put your nose down and work. Again, that will work to a point, but then you run into issues that Greg did, where there was a lot of things that were holding him back, even though he was working super hard. And so again, in this avatar, like we have to be, when we have normal jobs, everything like that, like we have to be more, and again, our whole life isn't just working out. Like we have to be strategic with what we do here. And again, I think that's where most people go wrong, is they're just nose to the ground. Let's just get it done. And if there's no focus on these things outside of the gym and calories and putting yourself in a good position to actually change. It reminds me of sleep, right? Where a lot of people are just like, hey, I just need to get 8 hours of sleep. And yes, we want to push for more sleep, but if we're not setting ourselves up for the right conditions for sleep and improving sleep quality, you could get more, but it's just, you're not going to get the return on the investment there. So you're better off, once you can get 6-7 hours of sleep, we're really better off focusing on getting in good quality and setting yourself up for good sleep. So that's really what I'm trying to get at here, and where Greg needed the most help with everything. So hopefully that was helpful. If you have any questions on Greg's transformation, let me know. Again, I'll link the Instagram post into it, so you have that, so you can see the actual picture. But if you are interested in finding out more about this, like how I set people up for body composition change, my body recomp checklist is for you. It's completely free. The link to that is in the show notes, so go check that out. If you haven't yet, please follow me on Instagram, Jeff. That's where I'm most active on social media, post the most content. You can reach out to me there if you have any questions. If you found this podcast to be helpful in any way, if you could leave a rating and review, that will help more people find it. Appreciate everybody who listens. And then lastly, if you are in Greg's spot and you just need some guidance on this, my free 30-minute strategy call is for you. We can dive into this, see where you need to go, and make sure that you're headed in the right direction, where you can head next with everything. So if you're interested in that, the link to that is in the show notes. That's it for this episode. I'll chat with you next time.